Okay, we have another cryptic Gemara here on Daf Nun Aleph, where the Gemara says that Bar Kapara said to the daughter of Rebi, "Tomorrow I will drink wine at the dance of your father and the yodeling of your mother." The Gemara says Ben-Elasa was a son-in-law of Rebi, was very wealthy. Rebi invited him to the wedding of Reb Shimon, his son. And at this wedding, Bar Kapara asked Rebi a bunch of questions, and Rebi did not get the answer that Bar Kapara was looking for, and Rebi coerced Bar Kapara coerced Rebi to have his wife pour him wine, and that Rebi should dance for him. By the way, the Achronim deal with the question that the Gemara says that you're now to make use of a woman, al tishtamish be'isha, which means that you can't have a woman, a foreign woman, pour wine for you. So how could Rebi's wife pour wine for Bar Kapara? In any event, the Gemara concludes that Ben-Elasa could not tolerate it anymore. Presumably, he couldn't tolerate them abusing Rebi or maybe making Rebi laugh. So therefore, he picked himself up and he took his wife and he left. To which the Gemara concludes, my Ben-Elasa, who is this guy? The Gemara says, we learned in a Brisa, and this is a Gemara also in Sanhedrin on Chaf Beis, that Ben-Elasa did not throw his money for nothing. He did not waste his money on nothing. He was not extravagant for nothing. He spent a lot of money on a very unique style of haircut. To show what the haircut of a Kohen Gadol was, where it says in Yecheskel, Kasayim Yichsemu, it says in Yecheskel, Kasayim Yichsemu es Rashehem. What exactly is the Gemara's question? My Ben-Elasa. What do you mean, my Ben-Elasa? Rashi says, Kalamer minayin dahava asher. How do you know he was wealthy? I guess the first question is, who cares? What do you mean, how do you know he was wealthy? Who cares how we know he was wealthy? We got his portfolio, his bank statement came to our address by accident. Like, why is the Gemara asking, how do we know he's wealthy? Why is that important? So let's see, there are a number of approaches. We'll begin with the Maharsha. The Maharsha says, "My Ben-Elasa, the Tanya loy lechinam piza lepirish Rashi dachak demai olmele hach braysa mehach uvda del elda kamar behedya Ben-Elasa chas nedra behava v'asher gadol hava." What do you mean? We said earlier he was wealthy. So if you're going to say, well, how do you know he was wealthy? Well, this braysa doesn't tell us how we know he was wealthy. It just says he didn't spend his money for nothing. He spent it on a fancy haircut. But it still doesn't tell us how he made his money. So if we need a Tanaitic source just to say he had money, then we already quoted one. We said earlier that Ben-Elasa chasnei the Rebi hava v'asher gadol hava. So what does this braysa add to what the previous one didn't have? So Maharsha says like this: V'nira lefaresh dahachi kamar. My Ben-Elasa. What did Ben-Elasa say? Im asher gadol haya. Maharsha is explaining that what the Gemara is bothered by is if he had a lot of money, lama nikra al shem aviv. Why don't we call him by his name? His name was, I don't know, Feivel, Beryl. He should be called Feivel, Beryl. Why do we call him Ben-Elasa? Ben-Elasa v'lei al shem atzmai. V'ka'amar d'tanya loy lechinam pizar Ben-Elasa. Says Maharsha, you know what the reason is? And this is such a contemporary idea. D'derech hayorshim oishar me'aviem levater ulefazer ma'oiseihem. If somebody works hard for their money, they won't be so quick to spend it and live extravagantly. But if somebody received money from the parent or the in-laws, they're much more extravagant. It's the derech hayorshim oishar me'avim levater ulefazer ma'oiseihem. It's the derech of those who inherit money from their fathers to be mavater and to just spend it extravagantly. Kedamrin parakam de Shabbos shlishis machal yorshin u'perish Rashi. There's an idea that if people don't work for their money, they're quick to spend it. Right? Because anyway, they didn't make it. They didn't work hard to get it. V'amirim per kisei adam, mi sheiniach lo aviv ma'is, one who his father left him money, v'roitzel avdan, yishtamish b'kli zechuches, he should hire a lot of glass, he should buy a lot of glass, v'yiskar poilim, and hire workers. V'lakach nikra Ben-Elasa, that's why he's called Ben-Elasa, al shem aviv, sha'oisrei haya b'Yerushmei aviv. This guy, he was wealthy from his father. And the Gemara is saying that even though he was wealthy from his father, he did not extravagantly spend his money for nothing, like other Yarshim. Usually if people inherit money from the father, they're quick to spend it. Ella de Ben-Elasa gam, shaya gam kin yorish, that Ben-Elasa, even though he doesn't even have his own name because it wasn't his own money, gam shaya gam kin yorish, loy pizer bechinam, he didn't spend it for naught, ella kedei laharais, but only to show, he did it to show what the haircut of a Kohen Gadol was. So the Maharsha learns that my Ben-Elasa is a question. That if he was so wealthy, why is he called by his father's name? And the answer is because he inherited it. And even so, he didn't spend it on frivolities. There's another perush here. The perush of Reb Shlomo Kluger in Sefer Nidrei Zrizin, where he says, Hine shelas hashas mahu Ben-Elasa in lo havana klal fi pshutai. The Gemara's question of what is Ben-Elasa has no meaning. Achnira hakavana dine masha braysa sipralanu masha Ben-Elasa lo yachal lemizbal. The braysa says Ben-Elasa couldn't tolerate it. My nafka mina lanu bazeh. Why do I care that Ben-Elasa couldn't tolerate it? The pasuk won't even tell me the disparagement of a non-kosher animal. Why are we telling me that Ben-Elasa couldn't tolerate it? Achakavana, says Reb Shlomo Kluger, the kavana of this Gemara is lahagdil mailas Rabbeinu HaKadosh, to magnify the greatness of Rebbe. Eich avor davar ma min ha-Torah hayeh mevaze atzmai kehedyoit. How he was willing to shame himself like a simpleton just to understand one extra thing in Torah. Where Bar Kapara said, do you know what Toyeva means? Do you know what Tevel means? Do you know what Zima means? And when Rebbe did not have a full explanation, Rebbe was willing to do a jig and pour Bar Kapara wine to be granted this understanding. The Eich Divrei Torah Chaviv and Olav. How Torah was so beloved to Rebbe. Achman Yomer Shayaz Bizayin Gadol Loi. So you'll say, well, how do I know how much he loved Torah? How do you know how much of a bizayin it was? Dimalei Havaloi Bizayin Kolkach. Lekach Sipra Lanu. Therefore the Gemara says, Eich Ben-Elasa Yachal Lizbal. Ben-Elasa couldn't take it. Umuchach Da Bizayin Gadol. V'afal Pikein Asar Rebi Minikam Alas Rebi. The reason why we need to say that Ben-Elasa couldn't take it is because to praise Rebbe, that even though it was so disparaging, Rebbe did it to have a deeper understanding of Torah. Especially, things are not recognizable only from the contrast. If Ben-Elasa hadn't left, we would not have recognized Rebbe's greatness. From the fact that Ben-Elasa couldn't take it, and Rebbe did it, we see the greatness of Rebbe. You'll ask, well, what's the raya from the fact that Ben-Elasa left? Maybe he's a Pashata guy, and he doesn't love Torah at all. So he left because it was embarrassing, so he just left. But if somebody would love Torah even a tiny, tiny bit, of course they would do it. So what's the raya from Ben-Elasa? Maybe he was an Ish Pashat, and Divrei Torah wasn't chaviv to him. And there's no raya from the fact that he left to the greatness of Rebbe. No, the Gemara says, you know how great Ben-Elasa was? He loved Torah so much, he spent all of his money just to demonstrate one halacha of what the haircut of a Kohen Gadol was. So Ben-Elasa was mechaviv Torah greatly. And even he couldn't tolerate staying there, seeing Rebbe's bizayon. But Rebbe was on an even greater level. And he was willing to shame himself to have a deeper understanding of Torah. The Kachamar Mahu Ben Alasa. Therefore, it says, "Who's Ben Alasa?" Ma Rabuse. Ma de Kamashalon Shehu Lo Yachal Lizbal Lekach. You know what the chiddush that he couldn't tolerate it? So the Tanya Lo Lechinam Pizar. That Ben Alasa didn't spend his money for nothing. Alakadei Lumay Taspar Shekain Gadam Ken Muchach. Degam Hu Ayu Divrei Torah Chavivan Alav. We see Ben Alasa dearly loved the Torah. And he was willing to have a deeper understanding of what the haircut of a Kohen Gadol was to spend all of his money. So imkain gam hu hayu divrei Torah chavivan alav, v'afal pikein lo hayachal lisbol zeh, and still he couldn't tolerate it. And even though he couldn't tolerate it, Rebi did it. Why? Because Rebi's love of Torah was lo yu'uman ki yisupar mizeh muchach malas Rabbeinu HaKadosh zanira kavana amitis be'ezras Hashem. So the Maharsha says we're trying to explain that even though, why he's Ben-Elasa, why doesn't he have his own name? The answer is because he inherited someone else's money, and even so, he didn't spend it the way people who inherit others' money would typically spend it. He dealt with it with discretion, except when he wanted to show chavivas for Torah. The way that Rav Shlomo Kluger learns it is, the reason we say that Ben-Elasa couldn't tolerate it is to show the greatness of Rebi, that Rebi's chavivos for Torah was so great that he was willing to embarrass himself, something that his son-in-law couldn't bear to watch. He was willing to do it to understand Torah. And don't say, well, his son-in-law didn't cherish Torah. No, his son-in-law cherished Torah so much that he was willing to spend all his money just for a deeper understanding of the haircut of a Kohen Gadol. But even so, he couldn't tolerate what Rebi had to do, and Rebi did it so that Rebi could have a deeper understanding in Tayeva, Tevel, and Zima. And then we have one more Perush, the Perush of the Netziv in Meroime Sadeh. The Netziv says like this. You know why Rebi didn't invite Bar Kapar to the wedding? Rashi says it's because Bar Kapara would make him laugh. There's another reason why Rebi didn't invite Bar Kapara to the wedding. Because Bar Kapara would always chep a Rebi, why do you marry off your daughter to Ben-Elasa? You married him off just for his money? But he spends his money extravagantly. So Bar Kapar would always chep a Rebi about his son-in-law, so Rebi didn't invite him. That's a new chidush. Why Rebi didn't invite Bar Kapara? It's because Bar Kapar would always challenge Ben-Elasa why he spent his money for nothing. And therefore the Gemara wants to conclude that Rebi says, no. My son-in-law didn't spend it on nothing. He has midas da'acharis, but he loved Torah so much that he spent his money to show this unique haircut. Says the Netziv, Tanya, Rebi Omer lo yachinam, de Bar Kapara mekanter l'Rebi. Bar Kapara would challenge Rebi al shehesi bitoy leBen Alasa, that he married off his daughter to Ben Alasa, bishvil ashray. V'hu mefazer ma'is harbe. And he would spend a lot of money. Ve'ein zeh midas da'acharis. That's why Rebi didn't invite Bar Kapara. Al Hilulo the Reb Shem Berei the Isa ben Nedarim. No Namad Beis. Mishum da'azmnei leBen Alasa chasnei. Because Rebi would have to invite his son-in-law, like the Gemara says on Nun Aleph Amud Beis. Actually, Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. V'hayayari shamei kanteroi. Rebi was afraid that Bar Kapara would start up with him and would start up with his son-in-law. V'alzeh amar Rebi d'lo yachinam pizar Ben Alasa. Ben Alasa didn't spend it on nothing. Ve'eno mefazer achinam chas v'shalom. Elo yesh bo midas daracheretz. He has courtesy. He has propriety. V'rak chibev divrei Torah harbe. He just loved Torah so much. Ad shepizar al zeh esma oisav. So that's the third question, my Ben-Elasa. The Maharsha says, the question is, why didn't we call him by his name? And the answer is because he inherited the money, but still, he didn't spend the money like people who usually inherit. Number 2, we have the parish of Rav Shlomo Kluger. It's to praise Rebi, that even though Ben-Elasa, who loved Torah so much, he couldn't tolerate what they were doing to Rebi. Rebi did it because he loved Torah even more. And the Netziv is Mechadesh, that it's explaining why Ben-Elasa was so extravagant. Because that's the whole reason why Rebi didn't invite Bar Kapara in the first place, because he was afraid that Bar Kapara would mock Ben-Elasa to him or to Ben-Elasa himself. Rabbi Isai, have a great day. Bracha v'atzlacha. Hopefully this week regular schedule. Okay. Be matzliach. Kol tov.